And the African National Congress says its leader, President Cyril Ramaphosa, will appear before the State Capture Commission to defend the party's position in the inquiry. Hello and welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Teniola Kibwale. We're still keeping our eyes on the happenings in Zimbabwe as the government has defended the crackdown by security forces following violent protests over a sharp rise in fuel prices. Local media quotes the government spokesperson saying, "When things get out of hand, a bit of firmness is needed." This comes after Zimbabwe's Human Rights Commission accused the security forces of using systematic torture against protesters in recent days.
In a report issued by Zimbabwe's Human Rights Commission after visiting various parts of the country affected by the violence, the Commission said opposition activists were subjected to severe beatings. The report also accused the security forces of letting dogs loose on those who they suspected of causing trouble.
Complainants and witnesses who spoke to the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission highlighted that armed soldiers and police visited their homes starting in the evening of Monday, 14 January 2019. They reported a heavy crackdown characterized by indiscriminate and severe beatings.
The comments reinforced concerns that Zimbabwe is reverting to the authoritarian rule that characterized the regime of former leader Robert Mugabe. In his first public comment since cutting short a foreign trip, President Emmerson Mnangagwa condemned the violence by security forces, calling it unacceptable and a betrayal of the new Zimbabwe. He added that the misconduct will be investigated and, if required, heads will roll, furthermore calling for a national dialogue with religious, civil society and opposition leaders.
We want a new Zimbabwe with a new mind that can fight with other international world.
Meanwhile, Nelson Chamisa, leader of the main opposition party, Movement for Democratic Change, MDC, describes the brutal crackdown by security forces as a political cleansing by the government.
The most important point right now is the stopping of harassment, mass arrests of people who did not commit any crime. They were arrested at their homesteads, they were invaded, and also people being taken out of their homes. So at no point were they linked to any commission of a crime if there was any crime committed. It's very unfortunate and very tragic that we are back to the past. What is clear is that it's total victimization on the basis of freedom of conscience. So we are having all these MDC members, MPs being victimized. It's almost a political cleansing, akin to Gukurahundi. It's almost Gukurahundi Party 2, where individuals are being targeted on account of a political party persuasion against the dictates of our constitution.
Also, a prominent activist, Pastor Evan Mawarire, who led the 2016 protests against Robert Mugabe, was arrested on the 16th of January and remains in detention. His bail hearing was postponed because state prosecutors were not ready to proceed with the case.
Dr. Barnabas Suleiman is a lecturer at Base University. He joins us live from our Abuja studios. Good to have you on the program, sir. Well, let's begin here. A lot has happened in Zimbabwe. What are your thoughts concerning all that has happened over the past week?
Thank you very much for having me. I think that what is happening in Zimbabwe is most unfortunate. This is a country that is rated as one of the poorest countries in the world. Zimbabwe today stands, the unemployment stroke underemployment rate stands at 95%. What that means is that you just have about 5% of the population of Zimbabweans that are employed, that have permanent employment with high pay. And in such a country, a government to come up with a policy of increasing the fuel price, it's unfortunate. And my thinking about it is that the country is gradually becoming a failed state.
Well, the government has defended its use of force and crackdown on protesters by saying a bit of firmness is needed. But does this justify reports of deaths we've been hearing? I mean, does firmness need to lead to the loss of life?
The response of government is unfortunate. I mean, it ought not to be. In a democracy, the citizens have the right to protest policies of government that they consider unfavorable. And the action of the government of Zimbabwe to increase the fuel price, and which has led to the inflation that they currently have in that country, of course, citizens have the right to protest. And the manner in which the security agencies are going about it has been condemned by the world, and I think that is unacceptable. And the president must act by calling them to order, not just making political statement that is unacceptable. If it's unacceptable, then as the commander-in-chief in that country, he needs to take immediate action that will bring that to an end.
I mean, President Ramaphosa has said that he's going to investigate the violence against civilians. But don't you find this ironic when it is the soldiers that are acting out this violence against the civilians?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
President Ramaphosa has said he's going to investigate the violence against the civilians. But today we had the government spokesperson saying firmness is needed when it is needed. Don't you find it ironic that he's planning to investigate the violence when it is coming from the government?
That's the insincerity of the regime that you have, in Zimbabwe. Well, as a matter of fact, you should know that what is happening in Zimbabwe is not new. All the inhuman treatments that Zimbabweans have been facing for the past 4 decades have always been supervised by the current president of Zimbabwe under the leadership of Robert Mugabe at the time. So it is clear that government is not sincere about its statement that is going to investigate the crackdown on protests and protesters in Zimbabwe. They are not clear about it, and I think that government, that is the African Union and other governments of the world, would have to step in to call the president of Zimbabwe to order so that the right thing can be done. The killings going on in Zimbabwe is making the situation there worse, and the earlier they put an end to that, the better for the continent of Africa, and particularly the country of Zimbabwe.
So I'm guessing you agree with this notion where critics are saying that what we're seeing now is a repeat of what we saw under Robert Mugabe.
Sure. As a matter of fact, I don't believe that there's change of regime in Zimbabwe. What you have is that there's change of personality. I mean, all the killings, all the human rights violations that took place under Robert Mugabe was directly supervised by the current president. So definitely there's no change of regime. You just have change of person in that there's change of the political leadership there, but certainly not regime. They believe in the same thing, the same philosophy of hounding protesters, of intimidating people, of carrying people to toe their line. So there's no change of government. There's no reverting. It's actually what has been, and it will continue to be, except there's a true democratic change of government in the country of Zimbabwe.
Dr. Barnabas Suleiman, thank you for your analysis on that.